My cousin kicked his daughter out on her birthday. So we took her in and faced a family backlash that changed everything about loyalty and who counts as family. Here's how this whole mess started. My wife, who is 27, and I, at 30, live on a pretty big farm. 300 acres of land with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. We built it with that in mind, figuring it would be nice to have one place where everyone could gather and crash for as long as they wanted. You know how some people have those spots everyone gravitates toward for family gatherings? That's what we wanted. For a while it worked out great. Summer would roll around, and we'd have cousins, uncles, aunts, and everyone else filling up the place. There would be kids running around, people sitting by the fire pit, and campers parked all around the field. It felt like the heart of the family. Now, my cousin Bill, who is 56, is part of that crowd. He's been around forever and has always brought his kids when the family visits. His daughter Alice is 18 now, and she's from his first marriage. Her mom was an immigrant who didn't have any family here, and unfortunately she passed away when Alice was just 2 years old. It's rough stuff. But here's the thing. Bill remarried pretty quickly after that. Just 6 months later, he was with Tanya, who is now 52. Together, they had 3 more kids. Bill and Tanya's home is like a whole different world. Everything is about their 2 oldest sons and their youngest daughter, the one they had together. Alice seems invisible over there. I mean, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I can clearly see how much they leave her out. It's like she's just there. They do all this fun stuff with their kids, go on trips, and sign them up for all sorts of activities, while she's just stuck at home. No vacations, no extracurriculars, nothing that costs a dime. She's pretty much left to fend for herself. I've watched Alice grow up. She's been coming to our farm every summer for the past 4 years. I think she comes here because Bill and Tanya just want her out of their hair. They're always talking about how she's trouble and how she needs to learn some respect. I'm not saying she's perfect, but you can tell she's just trying to get some attention. The thing is, Alice can be a handful. I won't sugarcoat it. She's got that typical teenage attitude, like she doesn't care about anything. And yeah, she can be loud. There have been plenty of times when she's come over to our place, and I've heard stories about her blowing up at her stepmom, full-on screaming matches, sometimes over the smallest things. She slams doors, swears up a storm, and honestly, it seems like she's always ready to go to battle. And yeah, maybe she acts like one. But you've got to consider why she's like this. From what I've seen, her acting out only started when she realized she wasn't getting the same treatment as her siblings. It's like she's a totally different person when she's not at home with others, teachers, folks on our farm, even strangers. She's polite, quiet, and tries to blend in. But as soon as she gets home, it's like all hell breaks loose. I think about it a lot. It's like she has 2 different personalities. The Alice when she's out and about, and the Alice when she's around her dad and stepmom. No wonder she's upset. What's wild is that they don't even see it. Bill and Tanya act like everything's fine with their kids, but when it comes to Alice, she's always the problem. Anyway, Alice started working on our farm during the summers because they needed her out of their space. Honestly, she's not bad at the work. When she has something to focus on, she really puts in the effort. She's great with the animals and has even learned a few things, like fixing fences and helping out with equipment. She seems to enjoy it here, maybe because it's a break from all the drama at home. We didn't mind having her around. In fact, we liked that she was getting a taste of what it's like to work hard and actually be part of something. This summer, things got a little more intense. She was turning 18 and I knew it was going to be a rough one. Bill had been going on about how he was going to kick her out once she turned 18. It'll teach her responsibility, he said. Just like that, she's on her own? I'm not sure how that's supposed to teach anyone responsibility. We talked to Alice about it a few times and you could tell she was nervous. She didn't have anywhere to go, and her dad was serious about kicking her out. We decided that if push came to shove, we'd take her in. My wife and I had the room, and we figured why not give her a chance to get back on her feet. We could help her figure things out, maybe get her set up for college or a job or something. She deserves that much at least. The night before her birthday, we had her over for dinner. She didn't say much, just picked at her food and looked like she was a million miles away. My wife tried talking to her about her plans after graduation, but Alice just shrugged. She didn't know, and how could she? Her parents didn't exactly set her up for success. Later that night, my wife and I had a long talk. We knew it might cause trouble if we took her in, but at the same time, we just couldn't leave her hanging. It felt like when you see someone drowning, you don't just stand there and watch. And that's what it felt like she was drowning and we had a chance to throw her a life preserver. So we decided that the next morning, we'd show up at her place with my truck and help her pack. Alice was surprised when we pulled up bright and early. She'd been bracing herself for her dad's boot, but I think she wasn't expecting anyone to actually show up for her. We loaded up her things, just the stuff she'd bought herself or what others had given her. I wasn't about to take anything that Bill and Tanya could say wasn't hers. The whole time she was quiet, like she was afraid to believe it was actually happening. As we drove away, she finally spoke up. "Thanks," she said, and it was the kind of thanks you don't hear often. It felt like relief, like someone finally lifted this huge weight off her shoulders. I didn't say much back, just told her that we were glad to have her. It felt like the right thing to do. We were giving her a shot to build her own life without all the baggage her parents kept dumping on her. I mean, it's not like we had all the answers or knew what we were doing. We just figured if we could help someone out who needed it, why wouldn't we? And from that moment, everything started to change. But of course, that's when things got complicated. After we got Alice settled in, everything started to shift pretty fast. At first, it was all good. She was quiet, probably just trying to adjust to being in a new place. We set her up in one of the guest rooms. Plenty of space, her own bathroom, and some privacy. My wife and I wanted her to feel like it was her home, not just some temporary setup. We told her that she could stay as long as she needed, and there was no rush for her to figure everything out. Now, here's the thing. I don't have kids, so I'm not going to act like I know everything about raising one, especially not a teenager. But I knew enough to realize she was still carrying a lot of baggage from her dad and stepmom. It's not like you can just erase years of feeling left out and pushed aside just because you're in a new spot. So we took it slow. We didn't push her to talk about it or anything, but we made sure she knew she could if she wanted to. Alice mostly kept to herself the first few days. She'd come down for meals and help around the farm when we needed an extra hand, but other than that, she was pretty quiet. I figured she was still trying to wrap her head around everything. Can't blame her, really. One minute she's getting kicked out of her house, and the next she's living with her cousin and his wife on a farm. That's a lot for anyone, let alone an 18-year-old who's been through what she has. My wife was great about it, though. She's always had a way of making people feel welcome. She'd leave snacks out for Alice, made sure her room was stocked with everything she might need, and even got her a small TV for her room. Slowly but surely, Alice started to warm up. She began opening up a bit more, started helping out with the animals without us even asking, and she'd even join us at the dinner table with a smile now and then. Everything was smooth sailing from there, but of course, that's when Bill and Tanya started getting wind of what was happening. It didn't take long. I mean, word travels fast in our family, especially when you've got a big place like ours where people are always coming and going. They must have heard from someone that Alice was staying with us. And well, they didn't take it too well. The first time I heard from Bill was a couple of days after we moved Alice in. He called me up, and it was tense right from the start. Or small talk, just straight to the point. He asked. His voice had that tone like he was already mad before I even said anything. I wasn't going to lie. "Yeah, she's here." He let out this big sigh like he was annoyed. You know that's not helping her. I'm not the kind of guy who gets into arguments over the phone, but that got me going. I tried to keep it calm, though. Then Bill said, "Look, she's been through a lot. I'm not saying I know better than you, but kicking her out without a plan wasn't going to do her any good. She's a kid." He wasn't having it. "She's not your responsibility. She's mine." I could feel my patience wearing thin. Well, Bill, if teaching her responsibility means leaving her out to dry, then yeah, I guess I am undermining that. We went back and forth for a while, but it was like talking to a brick wall. He just kept repeating the same thing. How it was his job to parent her, how we were overstepping, and how we didn't understand what was best for Alice. Finally, I had enough and just told him, "Look, man, she's here, and she's staying as long as she wants." He hung up after that, and I could tell things were about to get messy. Sure enough, the next day I started getting calls and texts from other family members. Apparently, Bill and Tanya had been telling everyone that we took Alice away from them, and now they were refusing to come to any more family events unless she was gone. It felt like a slap in the face, to be honest. We'd always been the ones hosting everyone, making sure there was room for all. And now, because we took in Alice, suddenly we were the problem. My wife was livid. She's the kind of person who puts her heart into making people feel welcome. And to have people turning on us like that, it hurt. Aunt Linda was the next to call, and she tried to be more diplomatic about it. You know, it's not that they don't appreciate what you're doing for Alice. They just feel like you're stepping in where you shouldn't. I just told her straight, "Aunt Linda, I'm not trying to start a fight here, but Alice needed a place to go, and we had room. I'm not going to turn her away because Bill and Tanya think it's a bad idea." She sighed, and I could tell she was trying to find some middle ground. Maybe if Alice stayed somewhere else, like a dorm or an apartment, it might help. That way, Bill and Tanya wouldn't feel like we were taking sides. I didn't know what to say to that. It felt like everyone was more worried about keeping the peace with Bill and Tanya than actually thinking about what was best for Alice. And I get it. People don't like conflict, but sometimes you've got to stand your ground. I told Aunt Linda that Alice was welcome here as long as she wanted to stay. And that was the end of that conversation. After that, the texts and calls kept coming. A few cousins even said they wouldn't be bringing their kids over anymore. Something about how, with gas being so expensive, if not everyone's coming, then it's not worth the trip. It all just sounded like excuses. They were picking sides, plain and simple. But we weren't backing down. My wife and I talked about it for hours one night, just trying to figure out how to handle it all. She was worried about the tension in the family, but she didn't regret helping Alice one bit. And neither did I. We both agreed that at the end of the day, if we could provide Alice with a stable place where she felt like she belonged, then it was all worth it, even if some family members didn't see it that way. Alice, on the other hand, started to notice the shift. She wasn't dumb. I didn't want to lie to her. "It's not your fault, Alice." She nodded, and for a moment, I saw that same look she had when we picked her up, a mix of relief and uncertainty. I knew we were doing the right thing, but I also knew things were only going to get more complicated from here. After the family drama began, things got really awkward. We continued hosting our usual dinners and events, but instead of the usual crowd filling up the house, it felt half empty. Some family members just stopped showing up altogether. For those who did show up, it was obvious they felt caught in the middle. There was a lot of whispering and awkward glances at Alice, as if they were trying to determine if it was worth the trouble. Alice noticed too. She may not have said much about it, but you could tell she picked at her food during dinner, stayed quiet, and appeared on edge. It was like she was waiting for someone to say something, maybe even to ask her to leave. But my wife and I made sure she knew that wasn't going to happen. One day we had a gathering planned for my uncle's birthday. It was the kind of event that normally the whole family would attend. We would have tables set up outside, the fire pit going, and kids running around. It was one of those big deals that everyone looked forward to. But this time, people started dropping out at the last minute. Cousin Lisa called to say her kids were sick and they wouldn't be coming. Uncle Tom mentioned that work was too busy, and Aunt Linda said she wasn't feeling well. It was as if everyone suddenly had an excuse. I knew better. They weren't skipping because they had to. They were skipping because of Alice. It pissed me off. I didn't want to say anything to Alice, but my wife saw it on my face. So I kept my mouth shut and tried to act like everything was fine. When the day came, only a handful of people showed up. We made the best of it, grilled some food, had a small fire going. But you could feel the tension. Everyone was walking on eggshells. At one point, Bill and Tanya arrived, and I knew right away it was going to be a problem. They hadn't been to the farm since Alice moved in, and I could tell from the way Tanya was eyeing her that it wasn't going to be a friendly visit. Bill tried to act casual at first, chatting with some family members, but Tanya didn't waste any time. She walked right up to me while I was flipping burgers and started in. "You know this isn't helping anyone," she said, arms crossed and a tight look on her face. I knew exactly what she was talking about, but I pretended to play dumb. I asked. She huffed, like she was dealing with a child. "Alice, you're keeping her here." I set down the spatula and looked her in the eye. "Tanya, we're giving her a place to stay because she needs it." "Well, Bill and I think it's time she moves on," she retorted, not even trying to hide her frustration. "She's 18 now." I could feel the heat rising, and it wasn't from the grill. "Stand on her own? You guys kicked her out with no backup plan." At this point, a few people nearby started to quiet down, clearly listening in. Alice was off helping my wife set up some stuff by the barn, but I could see a few family members exchanging looks, gearing up for a front-row seat to whatever was about to go down. Tanya leaned in, lowering her voice like she was giving me a warning. I wasn't about to back down. That was it. She threw her hands up and walked away, muttering something about how stubborn I was and how we would regret it. A few minutes later, Bill approached me. He didn't look happy. "You know we're not trying to be the bad guys here," he said, glancing around as if to make sure no one else was listening. "But Alice needs to move on." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "If you really believe that, then why didn't you help her before all this?" He shifted uncomfortably, as if he didn't have a good answer for that. I shook my head. "I think it is. And until she's ready to move on, she's staying here." He didn't say anything else, just gave me a look that suggested I was betraying him or something, and then walked off. The rest of the night felt tense. People tried to act like nothing had happened, but it was clear that the whole situation had put a damper on the mood. Bill and Tanya left early, and a few others followed soon after. After they left, my wife pulled me aside. "You did the right thing," she said. I nodded, but it still felt like I was stuck in the middle of something I couldn't fix. And the worst part? Alice could tell something was off. I hated that she felt like she was the cause of all this drama. "It's not your fault, Alice." She didn't say much after that, just went back to helping clean up. But I could see she was thinking about it. The look on her face said it all. She felt guilty for something that wasn't even her fault. The next few days were quiet. Alice kept busy around the farm, and we tried to maintain some normalcy. But I knew this was far from over. We started getting more texts and calls from family members wanting to discuss the situation. It felt like everyone had an opinion on what we were doing. But I knew what they really meant. They wanted us to send her away so they could go back to pretending everything was fine. One night, after yet another round of calls, I sat down with my wife and Alice. I figured it was time for us to talk about what was going on. She looked down, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I shook my head. "Oh no, this isn't on you. They're the ones making it complicated." My wife jumped in too. "We want you here, Alice." Alice gave a small nod, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I didn't blame her. After everything she'd been through, it made sense that she didn't trust easily. But we were determined to show her that she was safe with us. As the days went on, the calls kept coming, and I could tell this was only the beginning of the family drama. But no matter how many times the phone rang, or how many family members tried to push us, I knew one thing for sure. We weren't going to back down. Alice was staying, and we were going to stand by her, even if it meant going against half the family. After the awkward family dinner and all the messages from Bill, things started to get tense around the farm. Alice was still helping out and trying to stay positive, but I could tell the whole situation was wearing on her. My wife and I were doing our best to keep things normal, but when your phone is constantly buzzing with family drama, it's hard to ignore. Then one day, we got an unexpected visit from one of my uncles, Uncle Tom. Now, Uncle Tom has always been the type to keep his head down and stay out of family business. He's never taken sides or stirred up trouble. So when he showed up at the farm unannounced, I figured something big must be going on. I invited him in, and we sat down at the kitchen table while my wife made some coffee. Right off the bat, he had this look on his face like he wasn't happy to be there. He shifted in his seat, as if I was nervous, and I knew this conversation wasn't going to be a good one. "And I've been talking to Bill and Tanya," he said, nervously rubbing the back of his neck. I sighed. "Yeah, I've heard that before." He hesitated before saying, "They're talking about getting the family involved. Like everyone." My jaw tightened. "A family meeting to decide what happens with Alice? She's not some community project, Tom." "Oh, no," he said quickly. "I told them that." It felt like a punch to the gut. It was one thing for Bill and Tanya to disagree with us privately, but dragging the entire family into it? That was a new low. Tom shrugged. "Something like that." My wife, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke up. "That's ridiculous. This isn't a democracy." Tom nodded but looked uncomfortable. "Oh, look, I'm just the messenger here, but they're serious about this." It all started to click. This wasn't just a disagreement anymore. They were trying to turn the whole family against us. I felt my hands ball into fists under the table. He held up his hands like he was trying to calm me down. "I'm not saying it's right." My wife and I exchanged a look. We'd been trying to avoid more conflict, but it was clear that wasn't going to be an option anymore. They were making this a whole family issue, and we would have to decide whether we were going to stand our ground or let them push us around. After Uncle Tom left, we sat there for a while, trying to figure out what to do next. My wife suggested that we reach out to a few family members who'd been supportive just to see if they'd back us up. It wasn't about taking sides. It was about making sure Alice knew she wasn't alone. Over the next few days, we started reaching out to people. We called Lisa, a cousin who'd been in our corner since the beginning. She was furious when she heard about the planned family meeting. "That's ridiculous," she said. "They're acting like Alice is some problem they need to fix." We also called a couple of uncles and aunts who had been on the fence before. Some of them were hesitant to take a stand, but a few agreed that what Bill and Tanya were doing was out of line. They promised to show up at Aunt Linda's house and speak up on Alice's behalf if things got ugly. Alice, meanwhile, was trying to act like everything was fine. But I could tell the idea of this family intervention was getting to her. One evening, while we were out feeding the animals, she finally brought it up. She asked, her voice quiet. I nodded. "Yeah, it's true." She looked down at her boots, kicking at the dirt. "I just don't get why they're so determined to make me leave." I put a hand on her shoulder. "It's not about you, Alice. It's about them wanting to control the situation." She sighed. "And you're not the problem," I said firmly. The next week, the day of the so-called intervention came around. We knew we had to show up, even if we didn't want to. If we stayed away, they'd probably take that as us backing down. So we got in the truck and headed to Aunt Linda's. When we walked in, the tension was thick. Almost the entire family was there. Cousins, uncles, aunts, everyone. Bill and Tanya were sitting at the head of the table, looking like they were in charge of some big meeting. Alice stayed close to my wife, clearly uncomfortable. I could see the worried looks from a few of the family members. Relatives who had promised to back us up were nowhere to be found. Bill stood up, acting all official. "Thanks everyone for coming." I rolled my eyes. Was it really about what was best for Alice? Or was it more about what was best for them? Tanya jumped in. "This isn't about us." My wife crossed her arms. Bill ignored that and started talking about how the family needed to unite, and how this division was tearing everyone apart. It was all just a bunch of words to make themselves look like the victims. A few of our cousins spoke up, but it was clear that Bill and Tanya had managed to get most of them on their side. Just as things were heating up, Lisa stood up. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice steady. "Alice has a home. She's safe, she's loved, and she's doing well." A few others nodded, but most stayed quiet. I could tell it was going to be an uphill battle. Bill kept pushing, talking about how we were isolating Alice and making her dependent on us. It was all nonsense, but he was saying it with enough confidence that some people seemed to believe him. Finally, I had enough. I stood up and said, "This isn't a democracy. Alice is an adult and she's made her choice. We're not here to debate that." There was a long silence, and then one by one people started leaving the room. Some gave us nods of support, while others just walked past without a word. Bill and Tanya stayed put, glaring at us. "We're not done with this," Bill said as we turned to leave. "Yeah, well, we are," I shot back. We left, and on the way home, Alice looked relieved for the first time in weeks. We knew it wasn't over, but at least she knew we had her back no matter what the family decided. All right, so we were getting closer to the start of Alice's university classes, and things seemed to be settling down a bit. She had been working hard on the farm, getting things done, and it felt like she was finding her rhythm. My wife and I were trying to stay positive, figuring that once Alice started classes, maybe all this family drama would die down a bit. We thought that if she was in a good place and had a routine, maybe Bill and Tanya would back off. Then, just when we thought we could finally take a breath, my phone rang. It was Bill. I knew I shouldn't have answered, but a part of me hoped. Maybe, just maybe, he was calling to find some middle ground. Maybe he'd realized how much this whole thing was stressing Alice out and was ready to work things out. I should have known better. "Hey, man," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He didn't bother with a greeting. "I heard Alice is getting therapy," he said, his voice cold. "Yeah, she is," I replied, already feeling the tension creeping in. "She's been through a lot." "Well, I don't know why you think that's necessary," he snapped. "When we raised her, she was fine." I couldn't believe it. "Bill, she's been kicked out of her home." He scoffed. That was it for me. I tried to keep my cool, but it was hard. "Bill, I'm not feeding into anything. She's got a chance to get some help and move forward." Silence hung in the air, and I could almost hear him grinding his teeth through the phone. "And you've changed, you know that? You used to respect family." That line hit hard. I had always been about family. My wife and I built this whole place for family gatherings, for everyone to come together. And now he was acting like I was the one tearing things apart. It felt like a slap in the face, but I wasn't going to back down. "Tim, I'm doing what I think is right. You don't have to agree with it, but Alice is welcome here." He hung up, and I sat there for a minute, trying to collect my thoughts. It felt like everything we'd done for Alice, everything we were trying to build, was being used against us. I was mad, but mostly I felt tired. It was like no matter what we did, someone was always going to find a way to twist it into something negative. Later that night, I sat down with my wife to talk. We knew that once Alice started her classes, things were going to change. She would have her own routine, and maybe, just maybe, the family would back off once they realized she was doing okay. My wife suggested we throw one more small gathering before Alice's classes kicked off, just to show her that we were proud of her and that she had a support system here. So we planned a simple dinner, invited a few close family members, just the ones who had been supportive, and set it up to be a quiet celebration for Alice. We didn't want her to feel like she was on her own, even if some of the family didn't see it that way. The night of the dinner went smoothly. A few of my cousins showed up, along with a couple of aunts and uncles. It was nice, and for a moment, it almost felt like old times. Alice seemed happy, laughing and talking with everyone. For once it felt like we could actually have a normal night without any drama. But of course that didn't last long. Just as we were finishing up dinner, I saw Bill's car pulling up the driveway. I knew right away that this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. He hadn't been to the farm since everything started, and his arrival now felt like a bad sign. He got out of the car, and Tanya was with him. They walked up to the house, and you could feel the tension in the air. A few of my cousins exchanged nervous looks, and Alice went quiet, her smile fading as soon as she saw them. My wife and I exchanged a glance, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. This wasn't going to end well. Bill didn't waste any time. I stayed calm, trying to keep things civil. He shook his head. "Oh, no." Tanya stood beside him, arms crossed, looking ready for a fight. I glanced over at Alice, who was watching with dread on her face. I could tell she was expecting the worst, and honestly, so was I. But I wasn't about to let Bill make a scene in front of everyone. "Fine," I said, crossing my arms. Bill took a deep breath, like he was gearing up for a speech. The whole room went silent. I could see a few people looking around, confused. Alice looked shocked, and I could tell she didn't know what to say. I was just as surprised as she was. After all this time, now they wanted her back? Tanya nodded and stepped forward. "We think it's best if she comes back to live with us." Alice stayed quiet, staring down at her plate. My wife put a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. I didn't know what Bill and Tanya were playing at, but I wasn't about to let them bully Alice into going back. "She's staying here, Bill." Bill's face hardened. "We don't want her here anymore." Alice finally spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. She looked up, meeting her dad's eyes for the first time. Tanya's face twisted in anger. Alice didn't back down. "But you kicked me out. You didn't care where I went or what happened to me." Bill's expression was hard to read, but I could tell he was losing patience. "We're your family, Alice." My wife stood up, her voice calm but firm. "She's not running away from anything." Tanya rolled her eyes. "Oh, so now you two think you're her saviors?" I'd had enough. "Interfering? You kicked her out." Bill shook his head, looking around at everyone as if trying to rally support. "And this isn't how it's supposed to be." I felt my hands clenching into fists, but I tried to stay calm. Bill looked like he was about to argue, but then something seemed to shift. He just stared at me for a moment, then turned to Alice. "Fine, stay here, but don't expect us to keep trying." Tanya turned and walked away, with him following closely behind. The silence in the room felt heavy, and I could tell that everyone was processing what had just happened. Alice sat there, staring blankly at her plate, and I could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. My wife and I didn't push her to talk. We simply sat with her, letting her know that no matter what, we were there for her. It wasn't the ending we had hoped for, but at least now she knew who really had her back.